What actually separates the super rich from everyone else? Is it luck, inheritance, ruthlessness, or is there something fundamentally different about how the ultra-wealthy think, behave, and make decisions? Rainer Zitelmann's The Wealth Elite is not another motivational book about mindset or speculation about what rich people might do. This is rigorous academic research, a groundbreaking psychological study of 45 ultra-high net worth individuals, each worth between $10 million and $5 billion. Zitelmann, a historian and sociologist with a PhD, conducted in-depth interviews to understand the actual psychology of the super rich. What he discovered challenges almost everything we think we know about wealth. The super rich don't fit the stereotypes. They're not primarily inheritors coasting on family money. Most are self-made. They're not gamblers taking reckless risks. They're calculated risk managers. They're not workaholics sacrificing everything for money. They're purpose-driven individuals for whom money is often a byproduct, not the primary goal. This book reveals the actual psychological traits, thinking patterns, and behavioral characteristics that distinguish the wealth elite. These aren't assumptions or theories. They're documented patterns from studying actual ultra-wealthy individuals. The chapter S are sometimes surprising, often counterintuitive, and always fascinating. Over the next 30 minutes, we're diving deep into Zitelmann's research. You'll discover the psychological profile of the super rich. You'll learn how they think about risk, failure, and success differently than others. You'll understand their actual motivations, which are rarely what you'd expect, and you'll see which traits can be developed versus which seem innate. This is about understanding wealth at the highest levels through actual research, not speculation. Let's explore the psychology of the wealth elite. Chapter 1. The Self-Made Dominance. Zitelmann's first major chapter challenges the popular belief that most wealthy people inherited their fortunes. Among his subjects, 64% were entirely self-made. 22% had modest inheritances that they multiplied substantially, and only 14% inherited significant wealth without substantially growing it themselves. This chapter is crucial because it demolishes the narrative that extreme wealth is primarily about privilege and inheritance. While advantages help, the majority of the super rich built their fortunes from relatively modest beginnings. They weren't born into billion-dollar families. They created their wealth through entrepreneurship, business building, and value creation. Zitelmann documents the actual paths to wealth. The most common was entrepreneurship, starting and scaling businesses that created substantial value. Second was corporate leadership, rising to top executive positions with equity compensation. Third was investing, though usually after building wealth through business first. Inheritance as a primary wealth source was the least common path among his subjects. The self-made wealthy came from diverse backgrounds. Some had middle-class upbringings, some came from poverty, some had educated parents, others didn't. What they shared wasn't privileged backgrounds, but specific psychological traits and behaviors that drove wealth creation. Zitelmann emphasizes that self-made doesn't mean without any advantages. Education, cultural capital, networks, and being born in developed countries all provide advantages. But the research shows that within those broad parameters, individuals who develop certain psychological characteristics can build extraordinary wealth regardless of whether they started with substantial family money. The practical implication is that extreme wealth is more accessible than commonly believed. You don't need to be born into a wealthy family to join the wealth elite. You need to develop the psychological traits and behaviors that characterize the self-made wealthy. The rest of the book documents exactly what those traits are. Chapter 2: Risk Tolerance and Risk Management. One of the most important discoveries is how the wealth elite think about risk. Contrary to the gambler stereotype, the super-rich are not reckless risk-takers. They're sophisticated risk managers who take calculated risks while building elaborate systems to protect against downside. Zitelmann found that the wealthy score significantly higher on risk tolerance than the general population, but their risk-taking is strategic, not impulsive. They don't gamble. They make bets where they have edge, information advantage, or control over outcomes. They take risks where upside potential significantly exceeds downside exposure. The research revealed a crucial distinction: willingness to take financial risks versus other types of risks. The wealth elite show high tolerance for financial and business risks, but often conservative approaches to physical risks. They'll risk capital on business ventures, but rarely risk their health or safety recklessly. How they manage risk is equally important. Wealthy individuals diversify across multiple ventures and assets. They build contingency plans for worst-case scenarios. They structure deals to limit personal exposure. They gather extensive information before major decisions. Their risk-taking is calculated, not cavalier. Zitelmann identifies what he calls entrepreneurial risk intelligence, the ability to assess opportunities accurately, identify where you have advantages, and structure situations to maximize upside while minimizing downside. The wealthy develop this intelligence through experience, but it starts with willingness to take calculated risks others avoid. The psychological dimension is critical. Most people avoid risk because fear of loss outweighs attraction to gain, what behavioral economists call loss aversion. The wealth elite have lower loss aversion. They focus more on potential gains than potential losses. This psychological difference allows taking actions that terrify average people. Zitelmann also found that wealthy individuals reframe risk. Where others see danger, they see opportunity. Where others see potential failure, they see learning experiences. This reframing reduces the psychological burden of risk-taking, making it emotionally easier to pursue high upside opportunities. The practical lesson isn't to become reckless. It's to develop sophisticated risk assessment capabilities, build systems that limit downside while preserving upside, and gradually expand your risk tolerance through successfully navigating increasingly challenging situations. Wealth building requires risk-taking, but intelligent risk-taking, not gambling. Chapter 3: The Achievement Motivation Profile. Zitelmann's research revealed that the wealth elite score extraordinarily high on achievement motivation, the psychological drive to accomplish difficult goals, exceed standards, and constantly improve performance. This trait was nearly universal among his subjects. Achievement motivation manifests in specific ways. The wealthy set challenging goals that push their capabilities. They measure progress objectively and adjust strategies based on results. They derive satisfaction from accomplishment itself, not just external rewards. They're internally driven rather than externally pressured. The research showed that for the super-rich, money often becomes a scorecard rather than the primary motivation. They're driven by building, creating, winning, and achieving. Money measures success, but isn't what fundamentally drives them. This explains why many continue working intensely long after achieving financial security. They're motivated by achievement, not by needing more money. Zitelmann identifies several components of achievement motivation. First is ambition, the desire to accomplish something significant. Second is persistence, continuing despite obstacles. Third is improvement focus, constantly refining and optimizing. Fourth is competitive drive, wanting to excel relative to others or to previous personal bests. The wealthy also exhibit what psychologists call internal locus of control, the belief that outcomes depend primarily on their actions rather than external circumstances. This belief drives them to take responsibility for results and persist through difficulties rather than blaming circumstances or giving up. Interestingly, achievement motivation often developed early in life. Many subjects described being driven and ambitious as children and teenagers. Some traced it to family dynamics. Parents who set high standards, modeled achievement, or created environments where accomplishment was valued. Others couldn't identify specific origins. They simply described always being internally driven. The practical question is whether achievement motivation can be developed. Zitelmann suggests it's partly innate, but can be strengthened. Setting progressively challenging goals, celebrating accomplishments, analyzing successes, and surrounding yourself with achievement-oriented people all strengthen this trait. The key insight is that extreme wealth is often a byproduct of extreme achievement motivation applied to business and investing. The wealthy aren't primarily motivated by money. They're motivated by achievement, and money follows from successfully achieving ambitious goals. Chapter 4. Autonomy and Independence. A striking chapter was the wealth elite's intense desire for autonomy and independence. Nearly all subjects valued independence highly and structured their careers and businesses to maximize autonomy rather than accepting positions that offered high compensation but limited independence. This desire for autonomy manifested in several ways. Many rejected corporate career paths despite high earning potential because they couldn't tolerate others controlling their decisions and time. They preferred entrepreneurship where they controlled outcomes, even when it meant lower income initially. They structured businesses to preserve personal decision-making authority even as companies grew. Zitelmann found that wealthy individuals describe autonomy as one of wealth's primary benefits, not luxury consumption, but the freedom to make their own decisions, control their time, and pursue interests without needing permission or approval from others. Many said they'd accept significantly lower income to preserve autonomy. This autonomy drive has practical implications. It pushes the wealthy toward business ownership rather than employment. It motivates them to maintain control of their businesses even when selling equity might be financially advantageous. It makes them resistant to partnerships or organizational structures that limit their decision-making authority. The psychological dimension is important. Autonomy isn't just about wanting freedom. It's about needing to control outcomes. The wealthy feel more capable of making good decisions than relying on others. This confidence in their judgment, combined with desire for control, makes autonomy essential to their psychological well-being. Interestingly, the autonomy drive can create challenges. Wealthy individuals sometimes struggle delegating because it requires ceding control. They may make poorer decisions in areas outside their expertise rather than accepting others' guidance. The most successful wealthy people learn to balance autonomy in core decisions with delegation in supporting areas. The practical lesson is that if you value autonomy highly, traditional employment may never satisfy you regardless of compensation. Entrepreneurship and business ownership better align with autonomy drives. Understanding this trait in yourself can guide career decisions that create both wealth and psychological satisfaction. Chapter 5. The Failure Paradox, one of Zitelmann's most counterintuitive. Chapter SS is the relationship between failure and wealth. The super-rich experience more failures than typical people, not fewer. The difference is how they respond to failure psychologically and behaviorally. The research showed that 90% of wealthy subjects had experienced significant business failures, bankruptcies, failed ventures, major losses. Rather than these failures preventing success, they were often crucial learning experiences that preceded the biggest successes. The wealthy don't avoid failure, they experience it, learn from it, and persist. Zitelmann identifies several psychological differences in how the wealthy process failure. First, they don't internalize failure as personal inadequacy. A failed business doesn't mean I'm a failure. It means that approach didn't work. This psychological separation between outcome and identity protects self-esteem and maintains confidence to try again. Second, the wealthy extract lessons from failure aggressively. They analyze what went wrong, what signals they missed, what decisions were flawed. This learning mindset transforms failure from devastating setback to valuable education. Many subjects described failures as the best learning experiences of their careers. Third, the wealthy persist after failure while adjusting approach. They don't give up after setbacks, but they also don't blindly repeat failed strategies. They adapt, trying different approaches, markets, or business models based on lessons learned. This adaptive persistence eventually produces success. The research revealed that failure tolerance varies. Some wealthy individuals are highly resilient, bouncing back quickly from setbacks. Others struggle more emotionally, but persist anyway. What they share is ultimately continuing, despite failures that would cause most people to quit. Zitelmann also found that experiencing and overcoming failure builds what he calls entrepreneurial self-efficacy, confidence in your ability to navigate challenges and succeed despite setbacks. Early failures that were survived and learned from made subjects more confident facing future challenges. The paradox is that avoiding failure often prevents wealth creation. Those who protect themselves from possible failure by not taking risks also eliminate possibility of extraordinary success. The wealthy accept failure as inevitable cost of ambitious pursuits, manage it psychologically, learn from it, and persist. The practical implication is that failure should be expected, not feared. If you're not experiencing failures, you're probably not taking sufficient risks to build significant wealth. The key is developing psychological resilience to process failures constructively, rather than letting them destroy motivation or self-confidence. Chapter 6. Work orientation and time commitment. Zitelmann's research revealed that the wealth elite work substantially more hours than typical employees, but their relationship with work differs fundamentally from the common conception of workaholism. The data showed that during their wealth-building years, Subjects commonly worked 60, 80 hours weekly. Even after achieving financial security, many continued working 50-plus hour weeks. But they didn't describe this as sacrifice or burden. Most found their work deeply engaging and intrinsically rewarding. The psychological key is that the wealthy don't experience work as separate from life. They experience it as integral to identity and purpose. They're not enduring work to fund life. They're living purposefully through their work. This fundamental difference in work orientation makes extreme time commitment sustainable and even enjoyable. Zitelmann identifies what he calls flow state work. The wealthy regularly experience deep engagement where they lose track of time, feel challenged but capable, and derive satisfaction from the work itself. This contrasts sharply with how most people experience employment, as obligation endured to fund life outside work. The research also revealed that the wealthy maintain intense focus during work hours. They're not physically present, but mentally distracted. They engage deeply, make decisions efficiently, and prioritize ruthlessly. This focused intensity means their 60 hours of work often accomplish more than others' 80 hours of distracted effort. However, Zitelmann found nuance around work-life balance. While working intensely, many wealthy individuals also protected time for family, health, and personal interests once they recognized these areas needed attention. The most successful learned to work intensely but sustainably rather than burning out through unsustainable schedules. Interestingly, the ability to work long hours intensely appeared partly innate. Some subjects described always having high energy and capacity for sustained effort. Others built endurance gradually, but all found ways to sustain high effort over years or decades through genuine interest in their work, strong purpose, or strategic recovery practices. The gender dimension is important. Female wealthy subjects often face greater challenges balancing work intensity with family responsibilities due to societal expectations. Those who succeeded typically had strong partner support or made conscious decisions to limit some commitments temporarily. The practical insight is that building extreme wealth typically requires extended periods of intense work commitment. This isn't about suffering through jobs you hate. It's about chapter work you find engaging enough to sustain intensity over years. If you can't imagine working 60-plus hours weekly in your current field, you may need to find a different direction that genuinely engages you. The key lesson is that passion and purpose make intensity sustainable. The wealthy work long hours not through grim determination, but through genuine engagement with work they find meaningful. Chapter or creating such work is often the first step toward wealth building. Chapter 7. Social Intelligence and Relationship Management. Contrary to the lone genius stereotype, Zitelmann found that the wealth elite possess high social intelligence and prioritize relationship building and management. The research showed that wealthy individuals excel at identifying valuable relationships, building mutually beneficial connections, and maintaining networks over time. They understand that business success depends significantly on relationships with customers, partners, employees, investors, and mentors. Zitelmann identifies specific social skills the wealthy demonstrate. First is ability to read people, understanding motivations, capabilities, and trustworthiness quickly and accurately. Second is persuasion, articulating ideas compellingly and gaining buy-in from others. Third is network building, systematically developing relationships with strategically valuable people. The wealthy are often described as connectors, people who introduce others, facilitate relationships, and sit at centers of networks. This positioning provides information, advantages, business opportunities, and resources unavailable to isolated individuals. Many subjects said their networks were among their most valuable assets. However, the research also revealed that relationship management for the wealthy is often strategic rather than purely social. They deliberately cultivate relationships that provide value, information, opportunities, capabilities, or resources. This doesn't mean relationships are insincere, but they're purposeful. The wealthy are thoughtful about which relationships to invest in. Zitelmann found that many wealthy individuals are selective about relationships. They maintain smaller circles of deep relationships rather than large networks of superficial connections. Quality over quantity. They'd rather have 20 strong relationships than 200 weak ones. This selectivity allows investing sufficient time to maintain valuable relationships properly. The practical lesson is that wealth building is rarely solitary. Success requires partners, mentors, investors, customers, and collaborators. Developing strong relationship management skills, reading people, building trust, adding value to others, and maintaining connections is essential. Those who try to build wealth alone often struggle compared to those who leverage relationships strategically. Chapter 8. Optimism, Bias, and Positive Thinking. Zitelmann discovered that the wealth elite demonstrate significantly higher optimism than average populations. They expect positive outcomes, believe in their ability to influence results, and maintain positive outlook even during difficulties. This optimism manifests in specific ways. When evaluating opportunities, the wealthy focus more on potential upside than downside risks. When facing challenges, they believe problems can be solved rather than representing insurmountable obstacles. When projects fail, they maintain confidence that future ventures will succeed. The research revealed an interesting paradox. The wealthy are simultaneously optimistic about outcomes and realistic about challenges. They expect to succeed while acknowledging the work required and obstacles to overcome. This realistic optimism combines positive expectations with pragmatic execution. Zitelmann found that this optimism serves important functions. First, it enables taking actions others avoid because they're too pessimistic about success probability. Second, it sustains motivation during the inevitable difficulties of building businesses. Third, it attracts others. People prefer partnering with optimistic individuals who believe success is possible. However, the optimism bias can create vulnerabilities. Some subjects describe times when excessive optimism led to poor decisions, underestimating challenges, overpaying for acquisitions, or pursuing opportunities insufficiently vetted. The most successful learn to balance optimism with rigorous analysis. The psychological dimension is that optimism creates self-fulfilling prophecies. Believing success is likely encourages actions that make success more probable. Conversely, pessimism discourages action, creating failure. The wealthy's optimistic outlook drives behaviors that increase success probability beyond what pessimists achieve. Zitelmann's research suggests optimism is partly innate temperament, but can be influenced. Deliberately focusing on opportunities rather than obstacles, surrounding yourself with optimistic people, and analyzing past successes all strengthen optimistic thinking patterns. The practical lesson is that building wealth requires optimism sufficient to take risks and persist through difficulties. Excessive pessimism is incompatible with the risk-taking and persistence wealth building requires. If you naturally trend pessimistic, deliberately developing more optimistic thinking patterns may be necessary for pursuing wealth successfully. Chapter 9. The Role of Intelligence and Education. Zitelmann examined whether the super-rich are more intelligent than average and what role education plays in wealth creation. The Chapter S challenged some assumptions while confirming others. On intelligence, the research showed that wealthy individuals score above average, but not uniformly exceptional. The average IQ among subjects was estimated around 115-120, above average, but not genius level. What mattered more than raw intelligence was what Zitelmann calls practical intelligence, the ability to solve real-world problems, read situations accurately, and make sound decisions under uncertainty. The research revealed that different types of intelligence matter for wealth creation. Business success requires social intelligence, reading and influencing people, strategic intelligence, seeing patterns and planning effectively, and financial intelligence, understanding money and investment. Pure academic intelligence correlates weakly with wealth beyond a threshold level. On education, results were mixed. About 60% of subjects had university degrees, with many holding advanced degrees. However, 40% did not complete university, some never attended, others dropped out to pursue business opportunities. Education helped, but wasn't necessary. What mattered more was relevant knowledge acquired through any means. Formal education, self-study, or experience. Zitelmann found that many wealthy subjects were autodidacts, self-taught in crucial areas. They read extensively, sought mentors, attended seminars, and learned through experimentation. This self-directed learning often proved more valuable than formal education because it targeted specifically relevant knowledge. Interestingly, some subjects described performing poorly in traditional academic settings, but excelling in business. They found formal education structure constraining and irrelevant to their interests. Once able to pursue self-directed learning in business contexts, they thrived. This suggests traditional educational success and business success require different capabilities. The practical lesson is that intelligence and education help wealth building, but aren't determinative. Above-average intelligence is useful, but practical intelligence and domain-specific knowledge matter more than academic brilliance. Education provides useful knowledge and credentials, but self-directed learning and real-world experience can substitute. Neither exceptional intelligence nor elite education is necessary for joining the wealth elite. Chapter 10. Attitude toward money and consumption. One of the most surprising chapters was how the wealth elite actually think about money and consumption. Their attitudes often contradict popular stereotypes about wealthy people's materialism and spending. Zitelmann found that most subjects described money as important, but not the primary motivation. Money represented freedom, security, and scorecard of achievement more than purchasing power for luxury goods. Many lived relatively modestly, despite wealth allowing lavish lifestyles. They could afford luxury, but often chose not to pursue it. The research revealed diverse attitudes toward consumption. Some wealthy individuals enjoyed luxury spending and status goods. Others were almost frugal, maintaining modest lifestyles despite substantial wealth. The common thread was that consumption decisions were deliberate rather than compulsive. The wealthy spend intentionally on things they value while often ignoring consumption society suggests they should pursue. Many subjects describe becoming less materialistic as wealth increased. Early in careers, money held great importance as they struggled to establish security. Once financially secure, money's importance decreased, while purpose and achievement became more motivating. This pattern suggests that money's psychological significance changes with wealth levels. Zitelmann also found that wealthy individuals rarely compare themselves to others through consumption. Unlike middle class striving to signal status through visible purchases, the wealthy often feel no need to prove anything through consumption. Their security comes from actual wealth, not appearance of wealth. The relationship with money for the super rich also includes significant giving. Many subjects donated substantially to charity, supported causes they believed in, or planned to give away significant portions of wealth eventually. This generosity wasn't universally present, but was common, suggesting that extreme wealth often creates sense of obligation to contribute to society. Interestingly, the second generation, children of wealthy individuals, sometimes developed different attitudes toward money. Those who inherited wealth often had weaker achievement motivation and more materialistic consumption patterns than their self-made parents. This suggests that the psychology of building wealth differs from the psychology of inheriting it. The gender dimension appeared in consumption attitudes. Female subjects described feeling more pressured to spend on appearance and experiencing more judgment about consumption choices. Male subjects felt more freedom to live modestly or luxuriously without social consequences. The practical insight is that wealth building doesn't require luxurious lifestyle as motivation. In fact, maintaining relatively modest consumption during wealth-building years accelerates accumulation by directing resources toward investment rather than consumption. The super-rich often became wealthy partly by not spending like wealthy people until they actually were wealthy. The key lesson is that money is a tool for freedom and achievement, not primarily for consumption. Those who view money primarily as means to buy things often struggle to accumulate it because they spend earnings. Those who view money as means to freedom and achievement tend to accumulate because they invest rather than consume. Chapter 11. The Gender Factor. Zitelmann's research included women, and his Chapter S revealed both the unique challenges women face in building extreme wealth and the characteristics of women who succeed despite those challenges. The data showed that women remain significantly underrepresented among the ultra-wealthy, comprising only about 20% of the wealth elite. This gender gap exists even in recent generations, suggesting it's not purely historical. The research explored why. Female subjects described facing additional obstacles including gender discrimination in business, difficulty accessing capital and networks, pressure around family responsibilities, and being judged more harshly for behaviors accepted in men. These structural barriers made wealth creation more challenging for women than men with similar capabilities. However, women who achieved extreme wealth demonstrated particular strengths. They often showed exceptional persistence, needing to work harder than male counterparts to achieve similar recognition. They exhibited high social intelligence, building strong relationships that compensated for weaker positions in male-dominated networks. They tended to be strategic, choosing approaches that played to their strengths rather than competing directly in areas where gender bias was strongest. Zitelmann found that successful, wealthy women often operated in sectors where gender bias was less extreme. Certain service industries, digital businesses, or family businesses they built. They also frequently benefited from strong support systems, partners who supported their ambitions or family members who facilitated their business growth. The practical insight is that women face additional challenges in building extreme wealth due to structural factors requiring greater persistence and strategic thinking to overcome barriers. However, women who develop the core psychological traits, risk tolerance, achievement motivation, autonomy drive, optimism, can build substantial wealth despite obstacles. Practical implications. Can these traits be developed? The crucial question is whether the psychological traits characterizing the wealth elite can be developed, or whether they're primarily innate. Zitelmann addresses this directly. His conclusion is nuanced. Some traits appear more innate, while others can be developed. Risk tolerance, achievement motivation, and optimism seem partly temperamental. Some people naturally possess them more strongly. However, even innate traits can be strengthened through deliberate practice and experience. Traits that appear more learnable include business knowledge, relationship management skills, failure resilience, and work intensity. These develop through experience, education, and conscious effort. Someone starting with moderate capabilities in these areas can improve substantially. Zitelmann identifies several developmental practices. First, gradual risk escalation. Taking small risks successfully builds tolerance for larger risks. Second, achievement practice. Setting and accomplishing progressively challenging goals strengthens achievement motivation. Third, relationship development. Deliberately building and maintaining strategic relationships develops social capabilities. Fourth, reframing exercises. Consciously shifting perspective on failures and setbacks builds resilience. He emphasizes that developing these traits requires time and consistent effort. Someone won't transform from risk-averse to risk-tolerant overnight. But incremental progress over months and years can substantially shift psychological patterns. The practical approach is honest self-assessment, followed by targeted development. Identify which traits you possess strongly and which need strengthening. Focus development effort on addressable weaknesses while leveraging existing strengths. Not everyone can develop every trait to elite levels, but most people can strengthen capabilities sufficiently to pursue wealth building more successfully. So, there you have it. Rainer Zitelmann's groundbreaking research into the psychology of the wealth elite. From their self-made dominance to their sophisticated risk management, from their intense achievement motivation to their desire for autonomy, from their resilience in face of failure to their intense work commitment, from their social intelligence to their optimistic outlook, from their practical intelligence to their attitudes toward money. What makes this research powerful is that these aren't theories or speculation. They're documented patterns from studying actual ultra-wealthy individuals. This is how the super-rich actually think and behave, not how we imagine they might. The key insight is that extreme wealth correlates with specific psychological characteristics. The wealth elite aren't just lucky or privileged. They possess and demonstrate traits that enable building and sustaining extraordinary wealth. They take calculated risks others avoid. They persist through failures that would stop most people. They work with intensity and focus others can't sustain. They manage relationships strategically. They maintain optimism during difficulties. The hopeful message is that while some traits are partly innate, most can be strengthened through deliberate practice. You may not transform every aspect of your psychology, but you can develop capabilities that increase your wealth-building potential substantially. Here's your action plan. First, complete honest self-assessment. Which psychological traits from this research do you possess strongly? Which are underdeveloped? Be brutally honest. Self-deception helps no one. Second, identify your biggest psychological gap. Is it risk aversion preventing you from pursuing opportunities? Is it low achievement motivation limiting ambition? Is it poor failure resilience causing you to quit too early? Is it weak relationship management limiting business opportunities? Focus on your most limiting factor. Third, create a development plan. If risk aversion is your barrier, start taking small, calculated risks to build tolerance. If achievement motivation is weak, set progressively challenging goals and celebrate accomplishments. If you struggle with failure, deliberately reframe past failures as learning experiences. If relationships are weak, join communities and practice strategic networking. Within 6 months, you should see measurable shifts in your psychological patterns. Within 2 years, you can substantially strengthen previously weak traits. Within 5 years, you can transform your psychological profile to align more closely with the wealth elite. Remember Zitelmann's central chapter. The psychology of the super rich is different from average people, and that psychology is what enables building extreme wealth. Luck and circumstances matter, but psychological traits are the foundation. Thanks for watching this deep dive into the actual psychology of the super rich. If this research-based perspective gave you new insights into wealth building, smash that like button and subscribe for more content based on actual research rather than speculation. Drop a comment sharing which psychological trait you most need to develop. And remember, the wealth elite aren't superhuman. They're people who developed specific psychological characteristics that enabled building extraordinary wealth. You can develop many of those same characteristics. The question is whether you will. Now go assess your psychology honestly and start developing the traits that will serve your wealth-building journey. Until next time, think like the wealthy, behave like the wealthy, and build the wealth you desire.